fullness of God's presence among us. It's just so refreshing. So, thank you. Thank you. Last couple of days have been quite full. A number of us have gone to Brisbane with Thrive and Flourish to participate in a morning with Hope, or an afternoon evening with Hope Church and Randy Clark's group Global Awakening, which was quite significant. And then Tim and I had a day of prayer retreat with my mate Jeff Armitage on Friday, and then we went to Kickstart with Cole for breakfast yesterday morning. Shot over to Elderly to a Seedbeds Changemaker taster with Ash and Angie Barker, which was wonderful. And then I bolted back to Kickstart for the AGM via Roma Street to pick up Leanne. And mate, I really wish I could have been on the other side to see your face when Jason said, "Leanne, you can come forward now," and you kind of stopped in your tracks. What a blessing and a privilege it is to journey with your brother, and a real honour. Now, this morning we're jumping back into the Codebreaker series in the run-up to Easter, and there's a whole bunch of really good news. Some of it is we have a very good friend of mine since Bible college days, Jeff Sundstrom, who was our New Testament lecturer, mentor for me over the last 35 years. Jeff is coming to Maryborough, and he's going to be doing a Thursday night Seder feast. Like, he is a New Testament scholar par excellence. He is absolutely brilliant. And then he'll be preaching and bringing the message of God's story, Easter story, on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. So that's something to talk to our friends about. For us to come together on the Thursday night to celebrate a Jewish Seder feast, which would just be amazing to have Jeff's insights around that. To bless us, but then on the Friday and the Sunday. So that's really exciting, and part of, I guess, paving the way for his time among us over the next number of weeks is to jump back into Codebreaker, to look at some of the incidences that Jesus negotiated in his final week. And I don't know what you would do if you knew you only had 1 week to live. But when you start looking at how Jesus got about his stuff, it was both remarkable as it was provocative, amazing. But today I'd like us to take a moment or two to recap where we've been in Codebreaker 52. Well, that's where we are, 52, where we can actually review the first 10 chapters before we go up the hill to everything that awaited Jesus there. Recently, I attended a meeting where the key person that we were meeting with was delayed. There were a number of other folks at that meeting. So we got the message that he would be delayed. And I actually, to make the most of the time, I kind of figured, okay, well, let's do some who am I, who are you stuff. And so we started doing some of that who am I, who are you. We're having really rich conversation. It was excellent. After about 15 minutes, and I said to them, look, when this person comes into the room, we can read him into the conversation and we can then commence our corporate discussion together. There was, 7 or 8 people in that room. But and then we could read that key person into that conversation as a part of that. So about 15 minutes or so later, and we were having a really rich and revealing conversation with the people in the room. Now, this person has a reputation of being something of a leadership guru. And in his field, now he bustled in and said, "It's okay, I'm here now, the meeting can start." And I'm thinking, mate, we started 15 minutes ago. Talk about not reading the room. And he took over without any regard or deference or respect of the people that were there in that conversation. It was. We've all got our blind spots, but boy, oh boy, his was on display for everyone to see that morning. It was It was amazing. And the truth is, we do all have our blind spots. You have them, I have them, we all have. And that's why we need one another. We need one another. Part of the blessing of the last 3 days was hanging out with Tim and those elongated conversations when we were driving and just talking things through and rolling things over. It was so rich. It was more than I could have got from that time on my own. We need one another. So before we head up the hill with Jesus, from Jericho to Jerusalem, and everything that awaits him there, we've got an opportunity to summarise Mark, his story so far, and check in with God and each other about how our discipleship is going. How are we seeing? Because you'll remember before Christmas when we did the Bartimaeus story at the Boys Brigade Parade, it was all about the recovery of sight of the blind, and faith for healing is faith for following. So when we revisit chapter 10 of Mark's Gospel, we start with the story of the rich man who was pursuing or wanted to add the kingdom of God to his other wealth. But unlike the rich man, Bartimaeus, who we talked about last time, he was landless and disabled. He's a victim of the very system that enabled the rich man to accumulate his wealth. And unlike the disciples, Bartimaeus didn't dare make a direct approach to Jesus. He calls out from the side of the road, from the margins, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He doesn't ask for status or position. He doesn't look for authority in this new administration of the Son of David. But he makes a simple request to receive the mercy of sight, despite the remonstrations of those who would try to silence him, his followers. So as we start to look at this story, I want to talk around it in terms of two types of power. And I'm not talking about AC, DC. Okay, I'm not talking about alternative currents of power and direct currents of power. No. This is much, much more influential than that stuff ever will be. And it kills when it's not exercised correctly. You know, it's remarkable what happens when you compare these two statements. So Mark 10:35-40. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him, that's Jesus, "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." So here I am. I'm here now. Jesus accommodates them and says, "Well, okay, what do you want me to do for you?" They replied, "That one of us sit on your right and the other on your left in your glory." So they were seeking status, position, power, influence in this new administration. So we know this story, but I want us to focus on that, what would you have me do for you? Because it's quite fascinating. The verse 36 is repeated in verse 51. So reading from Mark 10:45-52, then they, that's the followers and Jesus, came to Jericho. At the bottom of the hill, 12 or so miles up to the top of the hill, but this is all happening before they climb the mountain, which is quite steep actually. It goes from about 800 feet below sea level. Jericho's the lowest city in the world actually. Quite fascinating. 800 feet below to Jerusalem, 3,800 feet or so above. So that's quite a hike in 12 miles. I reckon we'd all be pretty puffed by the time we got there, let alone trying to sing the songs of ascent as we go. You know? Fascinating. But it's remarkable when you compare the statement in this story, they came to Jericho. Jesus' disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. Blind man Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, in other words, and we talked about this, son of the unclean ones. Quite fascinating, Timaeus. He was sitting at the roadside begging. When he heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more. I love this guy. He wasn't going away empty-handed. How often do we not call out on God just to go away the same way we came to him? He wasn't going to do that. He calls out all the more. Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet. He's calling you." Throwing his entitlement, throwing his cloak aside. His cloak just wasn't his shelter, just wasn't something for him to wear. It was his next meal. Throwing everything aside. He jumped on his feet and came to Jesus. Look at this. "What would you have me do for you?" Exactly the same phrase that Jesus used to his disciples. Oh, hang on. What's going on here? It's a little bit like, out of all of these groups we went to on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we were the only group, Maryborough, the only group from outside of the Brisbane region. What's God doing here and wanting to do here? Whoa, this is a highlight of something like that. "What would you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi." I love this. "I want to see." I love this. And so their responses and the context of them are worth revisiting one last time before we head up the hill. For in many respects, this summarizes the struggle that Mark outlines in the first 10 chapters and sets the scene for what is about to come. This is a remarkable statement that Jesus would use the same term for his disciples as he used for Bartimaeus. What might that mean? Maybe Bartimaeus is a disciple and he doesn't quite know it yet. I wonder. What would you have me do for you? So in this finale of the discipleship section in Mark's Gospel, it began when Peter correctly identified Jesus as Messiah in chapter 8 and verse 29. But you see, Peter, he rejects the way of the cross. Surely they're not going to kill you. That's not going to happen. I won't let that happen. He rejects the way of the cross. And then the rich man who refuses to dismantle and deconstruct his addiction to wealth and power and redistribute all of that which he had to the poor. He had the kingdom in his hand and missed it. And went away empty-handed. And Jesus can't grant James and John their request to sit on his right and left. And the reason why that is because it would have reinforced their delusions of grandiosity. It would have reinforced the very system, it would have replicated the very system of exploitation that Jesus was trying to break them out of. Systems that entrap people, that exploit people, that hold them captive. Jesus came to free people from those systems. They were all saying, Peter, the rich man, James and John, they were all saying in various ways, I'm here now. I'm here now. I'm here. But Jesus helps the beggar because he knows he's blind. And Bartimaeus, look at Bartimaeus' response. And I will follow. And I will follow. Jesus says, there you are. I see you. There you are. Can you see the difference here? And can you see how it impacts Bartimaeus? Fishes him literally out of darkness. Fishes him out. What would you have me do for you? I'm speaking to you as one of my disciples. Whoa, that's provocative. Because he hasn't prayed the prayer, has he? This is provocative. Gwen, you would see this in your prison chaplaincy. Carol, you will see this in your coach ministry. Cole, you will see this in your boys brigade. Shannon and Denise, you will see this among the people that you are spending time with the ASD support. You will see this, people who are disciples and yet are yet to discover that. Because Jesus says to each one of them and us, what would you have me do for you? This is such a beautiful phrase. And Bartimaeus responds, I will follow. And at the end of the section, Bartimaeus addresses Jesus by the wrong term, actually, Son of David. Because you see, Jesus pushes back on that. If you have a look at chapter 12 in Mark's Gospel, 35 to 37, he actually pushes back because of all of the military and political associations with that term, because that was not the kingdom he was establishing. He was not establishing David's kingdom, he was establishing the kingdom of his Father. Jesus doesn't want us to become Christians. He wants us to be followers. Faith, and it's only faith for following. Faith expressed in discipleship that makes us well. The way of Jesus, it exposes these two kinds of power. That power that is conflicted in our hearts, in our families, in our communities, in our world. And the way of Jesus confronts it in that same realm. The events of Eden's garden resulted in a competitive challenge of one to dominate over another. That was evidenced in the creation narrative of Genesis 1, 28 to 30. Go forth, fill the earth and subdue it. Not live in harmony with it. Not make sense of it as you go. But go into creation and subdue it. And we reap a reward for that today that I don't know that anyone is too proud of. I mean, I wonder what the world would look like if instead of trying to conquer and subdue it, we actually set our hearts to live in harmony with it. Scary thought. That's another sermon, though. We shan't get diverted. But competitiveness is repeated in the pronouncements of the implication of the separation of Adam and Eve from God. God said, this is the outworking. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. That was never the plan. Not ever. Competitiveness, domination, control. It's evidence of separation from God and separation from God's ways. But you see, it's the way of Jesus that is different. Rather than saying, I'm here now, it's there you are. The way of Jesus actually undoes systems of domination, competitiveness and control by the personal and political practice of non-violence. It's a practice that pulls at the loose ends of those tatty garments and leaves them shredded, exposing them for what they are, undoing our participation and our entanglement in those exploitive systems. I've got a mate who's wrestling with the bureaucracy at the moment over a boat. The system is entangling him. And I'm saying, mate, We're not going to have that because we march to the beat of a different drum. Jesus' way is very different. It's a way where exclusivity is countered by being inclusive. It's a way where greed is undone by generosity, where ruthlessness is replaced by mercy. Callousness is drawn under through compassion. Disloyalty by faithfulness. Exploitation with loving kindness. Prejudice by justice. And if you read the first 10 chapters, and if you don't see anything else apart from that, you're reading a different book than I am. Because this is what I see in the first 10 chapters of Mark's Gospel as Jesus is revealing not just his way, but the way of the Father's kingdom. The ways of Jesus contradict all the usual notions of social and economic security. More superannuation, more money in the bank, work longer, work harder. These are all practices that entrench poverty and domination. The idea of trickle-down economics is a nonsense. It is touted by the rich and they get richer and the poor get poorer. That is not Jesus' way. The idea if you can pay, you can play, it's not the way of God's kingdom. The way of Jesus, it's a way of plenty for everyone. Through the generosity of sharing and equitable practice. Yet sadly only rarely do we see the church embracing these practices. But when we do, people see the church as remarkable. They want to participate. Think about William Wilberforce and the slavery. Think about the impact of the Welsh revivals and the Wesleyan revivals in England. And part of that movement was education for everyone, not just the elite, but education for everyone. Massive social transformation. That's why we have Coach. To come alongside of people as alongsiders and to enable them not to live their best life now, but rather that they can be enabled to live. When we see the church doing the stuff that Jesus did, it's remarkable and people want to participate. They want to participate because it's worthwhile. And it's so hard to be what you can't see. And that ramps up the focus on Bartimaeus' request to Jesus. Because you see, there are many who think they see, the disciples thought they saw. Mark 8:32, the second touch healing of the blind man at Bethsaida. What do you see? I see people as trees. That's what exactly the disciples were seeing people as trees. Touched them a second time. What do you see now? I see clearly. You see, the disciples thought they could see, but they were as blind as bats. They saw through the fracture of their own broken lenses and broken systems and wanted to replicate that time and time and time again. And as my dearly departed mum would say, God bless her, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. Still, over church history, many have experimented with gospel innovation, resulting in massive societal change. Indeed, we are. You've heard me mention a few this morning. Coach, drug arm, Boys Brigade, neurodiverse. Like we're moving out into the community in the way that we haven't done for quite some time. It's exciting to hear the stories, and Tim's going to interview Carol over the communion this morning. I'm looking forward to hearing some stories, Carol. Momentum. Our shed happens, the men's thing that's happening in our church, going to Lance and Nola's this week for breakfast. Looking forward to that. These are all initiatives that bring hope, shine light, bring healing, bring opportunity to those who, for the most part, are overlooked by the many. You know, in every area of discipleship, the temptations of competitiveness, domination, jealousy, or protecting one's own turf arise. And we need an examination of conscience and motive. That's what's required to follow Jesus. You see, before Christmas, through our Thrive and Flourish, I really anticipated Petrichor, the reign of God, and I was looking for the fruit. I became so preoccupied looking for the fruit that I forgot to look at Jesus. And I was making myself unwell, and I apologize to you for that. That's not what you require from your pastor. Yeah, the fruit's great. But you know, I've never seen a grapevine strain and squeeze to push out a grape, have you? The fruit, it follows. If we abide, Jesus has given me a workover in these last few days, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. So by way of reflection this morning, to check out how you're seeing, please take some time to consider these questions. So as you're walking towards your Jerusalem in this story, are you doing that in a sense that you're less interested in power now than when you began your discipleship journey? I hope you've read my story on the front of the newsletter this week. Neither you, Simon, nor the 50,000, nor the Romans, nor the Jews, nor Judas, nor the 12, nor Jerusalem itself understand it all. Understand what glory is. Understand what power is. It's been a profound song for me. I don't understand what glory is, and I don't understand what power is. But the way I've experienced it, I don't want it. Because that's not the way of Jesus. But if we can get our heads around how Jesus' ways undoes that, that's what I want to live for. That's what I want to die for. That's what I want my life to count for. So am I willing to lose my life in the sense that Jesus meant it? I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And I now live the life I now live in the body. I live through faith in the Son of God who died and gave himself for me. Am I truly living for the values and the purpose of something beyond and greater than myself? Am I open to the idea that those who lead should be content, often, with following? I became so focused on the fruit, I was forgetting to follow. Do I believe that leadership should always be defined by service? I hope that you're engaging these questions in your own heart and your own mind, in your own situation and circumstance. They're not done yet. Do I feel that gradually over time my eyes are being opened to new ways of being human? Less interested in status, position, titles, more concerned about the other, especially the needy. If I'm a man, do I truly cherish the discipleship gifts of the women around me? And if I'm a woman, Do I honour and value the discipleship gifts of the men around me? It's a provocative one. I'm so grateful as a church we honour and respect the ministry of women in leadership. The place of women not sharing but preaching. Love it. Love it. Have I ever had the experience of being silenced, as Peter was, when I misunderstood the servant nature of discipleship? There's a few more questions to think on. And I'm happy to make these questions, to give them to you, if you want to reflect on these questions in your quiet times and time with God through the week. Because these are important questions. Because it's this stuff that's going to undo the entrapment to those domination and control systems that hold us captive and hold others captive. Do I understand that suffering has the possibility to purge, to humble, to save? Whoa. Yeah. Suffering, the way of suffering, the way of the cross, the way of suffering. Do I engage in futile competitions with others? Oh, Phil, I'm a better guitarist than you. Stand aside, son. Which ain't true. But I know you'd turn around and say, goody-o, there you go, see you later. I get it. But it's not true. But do we have that competition? I'm better at this than, I'm better at doing the numbers than Marilyn. Well, I ain't. We got the best numbers person that I have ever seen in my 35 years of ministry with Marilyn. Really grateful for your sister, the work that you do. But do I push and shove and put my elbows out, demanding for my place? Demanding that I get my way? Do I have a triumphant spirit, a little bit like we saw on January the 6th with that mob that stormed the US Parliament, the White House, with the Jesus Saves motif alongside of that political stuff. US nationalism, that triumphant thing. I have a divine right for this. To effect the good that I desire. I mean, is that the way of Jesus? Is it? I don't think so. I mean, in working for social change, do I identify more with Jesus as portrayed on the Mount of Transfiguration? When he had this meeting with God, he transformed into the brilliance of the moment, and there's Moses and Elijah and the boys are there. Do I identify with that kind of Jesus, or do I identify with the Jesus on the Mount of Crucifixion? Which Jesus do I identify with? The triumphant one, or the one who surrendered? He didn't love his life so much, but to pull back from death. Which one? A few more questions. I told you there was a list, but we've got to ask them of ourselves and each other. I'm not going to answer for you. I own my stuff. In seeking the kingdom of God to come into the world, do I rely only on human ability, human resources, without turning to prayer? Because you know something, if we only do whatever we can do, we are never going to see what he can do. Not ever. And it's time we saw more of what he can do. And we've seen that over the last 18 months, where God has massively blessed us in so many ways. Coach, Boys Brigade, Momentum, Drug Arm, the Neurodiverse Group, ASD. Amazing. Let alone KYB and Connect Group and the other ministries that we have. As Dan Lyons said when he was here recently, this is a church punching way above its weight. Let alone mentioning, Helen, the stuff that's going on in mission and mission support and expanding our capacity to do that. I mean, how good is this God we serve? The capacity he brings to us to include us in what he's doing. Turning to prayer. Do I see the struggles for justice as the contest between the powers of light and life versus the powers of darkness? Because you see, when I say, I'm here now, I am entrenching darkness for myself and others. But when I say, there you are, there you are, when I do that, we're actually bringing light. I love our carers with Nadine and Sonny. You're bringing light into their lives through selfless service. You are modeling among us the heart of discipleship. And I love it. And I love you. I love your presence among us and what you bring. It's life-giving, shedding light into darkness, and I love it. Thank you. Do I believe that the transformation of the world will be achieved ultimately from the bottom up? Do I believe that? Do I believe that? Finally, and I hope you've enjoyed these questions, and I hope it's provoked you. I hope it's stirred you up. I hope it's made you a bit cranky. And read that as a holy discontentment, just not being ticked off with me, but a holy discontentment. There may be some work to be done in your heart, just like there was mine. Am I convinced that God's reign ultimately depends on God and not me? And not me. I mean, consider all the activities of your life. Make a list. I'm happy to photocopy this off or send it to your email to give it to you to reflect on. But think about home, work, social circles, church, leisure. Critique each area against these questions and pay particular attention to those ones that make you cranky. Because these are places and principal areas to put effort into recognizing and contributing to build the reign of God. List the good and the bad of those settings. What are you contributing? You're reflecting Jesus' values. I'm asking a stack of questions this morning rather than telling you stuff. Reflecting Jesus' values into those environments and relationships. Are you doing anything to act in the opposite spirit? Where the values that contradict Jesus' values are present, and you're confronting that. So, to conclude before we come to the communion table this morning, we've got to ask ourselves, am I I'm here now person? Maybe not in words, but in attitude. Or, there you are. I see you. There you are. Cole, the reason I nominated you for the highest honour in Boys Brigade is that you have demonstrated among us that you are there you are person. It's a high bar, brother. It's a high bar. But it engenders the response from others, and I will follow. I will follow. Because one will intensify the darkness that entraps people. The other will shine light into their circumstance and fish them out of darkness like Bartimaeus. So will you pray with me? Please, Jesus, let us see again. That engenders a response from others saying, and I will follow. Let us see you again. Let us see through the eyes of your love, that we may follow you on the way, follow your ways, and invite others into the journey. I mean, perhaps before we go out for morning tea this morning, you might ask the person alongside of you to pray with you, and you with them, about how you are seeing, if there's been anything in this that has resonated for you. Maybe seek out the elders. Tony, Tim and Celia are here this morning, the pastor. Maybe seek out those for discussion and prayer, because Jesus gives sight beyond seeing. Let's straighten things up before we climb the hill for what he has for us there. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word to us this morning, your encouragement. That forgive us where we have these threads of being an I'm here now person, pursuing status, position, drawing attention. Father, help us to be transformed, that we can be an there you are person like Jesus. And for some of us it'll be, and Jesus, and I will follow. I will follow. Restore our sight. Help us not just to see through the light of your love, but help us to see you in your glory as we seek to follow in Jesus' name. Amen.